The real answer is I'm the son of an alcoholic father and heartbroken mother, and being part of a family, feeling a sense of belonging was always the most important thing to me. Even if I wasn't aware of it as a kid, I worked really hard to make love and relationship work as an adult. As a grown-up, got my ass handed to me many times. And everyone in the family is a therapist. One of the true gifts, if I can call it that alcoholism gave our family is we all, went on a healing path and became healers ourselves, right? Dad's a therapist, mother is a social worker, my sister's a therapist. And as soon as I sat with my first couple as a therapist, I just loved it. It was so alive, so dynamic.
Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers, because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button, and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and working on a product to help people overcome these problems, because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up, and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. I have Fiachra O'Sullivan. He goes by Figs. He's a relationship expert. The website is empathy.com, EMPATHI.com. And we're going to talk about how to make marriage work and meet your partner in the middle. So, Figs, thanks so much for coming. How you doing?
I'm brilliant. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Yeah, I guess Fiachra is an Irish name, right? Is it?
Yeah, exactly. Fiachra. But I like, it's weird where the emphasis is on, right? But, it's an old Irish name.
Well, Connor taught too, Figs. That's about all I know. So.
There you go. Very good. Yeah.
Well, tell me a bit about your background. How did you get into, I don't know if we want to call marriage counseling, or how did you start thinking about the dynamics of marriage?
The real answer is, look, I'm the son of an alcoholic father and heartbroken mother, and being part of a family, feeling a sense of belonging was always the most important thing to me. Even if I wasn't aware of it as a kid. I worked really hard to make love and relationship work as an adult. As a grown-up, got my ass handed to me many times. And everyone in the family is a therapist. One of the true gifts, if I can call it that alcoholism gave our family is we all, went on a healing path and became healers ourselves, right? Dad's a therapist, mother is a social worker, my sister's a therapist. And as soon as I sat with my first couple as a therapist, I just loved it. It was so alive, so dynamic. And, and the stakes were so high, I just was hooked. I was just totally addicted to it.
That's cool. So your parents, even though they had a lot of issues, they were still therapists during this time?
No, they became therapists after.
Oh, interesting.
Right? That was like, pain and suffering. I always say people change for one of two reasons. Inspiration or desperation, and you can count on one hand the number of people in human history that have changed out of inspiration.
Oh, yeah, it makes sense, unfortunately. Unless something really bad happens, it doesn't spur people to change or take action, so I understand. Okay, so you counseled this first couple, you loved it. I guess it sounds like you knew this is what you wanted to do for a long time or perhaps forever.
Yeah. But I went in a different direction first. I should say, was very lucky that I got to go to private high school in Ireland, and I managed somehow to get the grades good enough to go to Trinity College Dublin and study business and economics. I became a stockbroker. I came to America and I worked for Merrill Lynch as a, stockbroker. And then I became a stock option specialist, employee stock option specialist. And was the first person to bring like investment bankers into Google for Citigroup when I worked for them. And I was the black sheep of the family. I tried to go a different direction. But here's the way I think about that early part of my career. I mean, I learned a lot. It was incredible. I learned a lot about human nature, including my own, right? But it really, I think of that was primarily a fear-based, not an inspiration-based, like initial path I was on.
Did you feel that by becoming a therapist, that's how you were able to handle your past and no other way?
I mean, I wouldn't quite say that. I think I think becoming a stockbroker, then eventually called a financial consultant, was me trying, look, if I make money, then I won't have to deal with my childhood wounding and my pain. But then, interestingly, when I gave it up, I didn't give it up and instantly become a therapist. I gave it up, and luckily I, had the time and the resources to go work on myself. And I actually just primarily entered this work as someone on their own personal journey of self-exploration. So I used to live at this place called Esalen. I don't know if some of your listeners might be familiar with it. It's kind of known as the Harvard of the human potential movement. So I was very lucky. I got to live there, be a student there, be immersed in.
What kind of things did you do there?
Well, firstly, I had to be a community member. I had to serve a purpose. So I worked in the kitchen, right, as part of the community, and I had to cook meals. But then, I did lots of psychotherapy, a lot of work on improvisation, theater improvisation, dance improvisation, just ways in order to really be able to hear and know what it is I'm actually feeling in a given moment of time and how to respond organically, like from actually deep inside myself, and how to truly be impacted and affected by the world outside of me.
If you don't mind, I want to go back to when you said your parents became therapists and your sister. Did they become therapists before you did? And when they did, were you like, what the hell? You guys did this, that, the other, now you're therapists? Did you think that in your mind, or what went on with that?
Not at all.
I think I would have, that's why.
No, I mean, look, it was just always a part of my life growing up, like self-development, and being curious, trying to be conscious, trying to get to know, the main question in consciousness is, what is it like to be me? So, way before anyone was a therapist, obviously my dad, my mom, my sister and I, we were curious about what is it like to be me? What is it like to be another human being? What is it like? What's actually happening in the dynamics? So the actual becoming a therapist was just a natural outcome of an organic process that we're all really interested and curious about.
It'll be kind of funny if you all sat around and you're like, Dad, tell me how this feels. And he goes, no, you tell me how this feels. And you kind of therapized each other, but made it a game, but not, I don't know. I just thought it might be funny, but probably not.
Well, I mean, look, it is a part of why I like doing these podcasts is that obviously often there's a little bit of a gap in understanding what it is to be a therapist, right? I'm sure sometimes people meet an MMA fighter and they're probably scared in case they're going to suddenly wrestle them to the ground, right? And put them in an arm bar. But yeah, look, I get the humor in it. And I mean, have been able to be curious about yourself and share what you're feeling and be curious about someone else makes for very rich conversation. By the way, if I can add, one of the things I actually find talking to people in everyday conversations is much harder because everybody's committed to just being the representative and not letting you know who they really are. Speaking as a therapist to a client, the client actually gets to be all of themselves. I get to meet all of the person, and I don't have to just do a cocktail party.
Yeah, but wouldn't there be pressure even when you're with a therapist to maybe get, let's say maybe someone thinks they're really messed up and they're going to a therapist, and yes, they want help, but maybe they still do hold back because they're like, wow, if this person thought I was this bad, they might say, I can't help you. Is there a fear?
Of course, some people are like that. They fear that. But look, a big part of the job, you're asking wonderful questions in a sense, because usually the biggest problem is that the person thinks they're really messed up and there's something wrong with them. And of course, that 999 times out of 1,000, that's not true. The biggest problem is the way they think there's something wrong with them. And so the first job, let's say, is to what we call counter-shame that person and help them realize that you're really normal and you're friggin' awesome. And this negative story you have about yourself is actually what's holding you back. And it's okay to be all of you. And you don't have to be hiding, abandoning, or rejecting parts of yourself. That's what's crazy. The way the world is crazy. Right in here, when you're talking to me, we don't have to be insane. Like, it's okay that you have fears about yourself. You're not sure if you feel the way you want to feel. That's totally normal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so you started doing therapy. How did you decide to make it your own? Or what is your own special brand of therapy? Like, what have you done with empathy, and how are you doing things differently?
Yeah, well, like I said, I primarily focus on relationships and helping people have better relationships, couples counseling, marriage counseling, counseling individuals. And, I kind of spoke to it a little bit, is a lot of counter-shaming people, helping people be themselves and accept their partner as themselves. And then through that process, helping them feel more connected to each other than they ever could have been if they didn't go through such a transformational process.
I know you obviously can't reveal private conversations, but can you somehow give an example of when you could feel that someone had shifted and become more open to you, or a couple, like you just said, you saw that all of a sudden they became closer and a barrier came down?
Yeah, well, obviously it happens all the time, right? So I'll just a little bit. The first thing we need to work on with a couple is you help them go from two separate stories of what's going on, right? They each have their individual story of what's going on. And there's actually a third entity in their relationship. It's the system that they're co-creating with each other. And once I help both of them see the systemic story where both of them make sense and both how they're feeling and then the way they're reacting makes sense, that actually helps their limbic systems. It's not just woo-woo, it's literally biology. It helps their limbic systems and their nervous systems feel safer with each other. And when people make that transition to really get what's happening between both of us and neither of us are the bad guy, you can feel it in the room. Like, they can look at each other, they can laugh, they sit closer to each other, they might be holding each other's hands, their knees are touching. And, so that's actually the big transfer. That's the first big transformational experience in couples counseling, what we call de-escalation. We're not even trying to make things better necessarily yet. Like, in terms of solving any particular problem, first thing we got to do is help their limbic systems know that they're not under a threat. And it's visible. Yeah, it's easily identifiable that these people have actually de-escalated and they actually are a team again, not a threat to each other.
Yeah, I've been, with my wife for about coming up on 24 years. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, so, when things are good, I don't have to worry. I just, whether I exist, I say things. I don't need to, hold anything back. And when there's an argument and stuff like that, then it seems like both people go back into themselves. And this thing called relationship separates for a bit. And now you have like two individuals that are looking at each other over a fence, or, they're looking at each other instead of like sitting with each other. You know what I mean? It's, that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And that's, so then my work, let's say in a situation like that, is just to help both of you feel how hard it is for both of you to be disconnected in those moments, to have empathy for how hard it is for the other person, and to see, would you look how awful this is that we have gotten stuck like this? And how could we give each other explicitly a chance to get back connected to each other? Because we mean so much, as opposed to letting it just happen like, hey, I'm tired fighting. You want to go for Chinese? Yeah, why not? Like, we actually make it an explicit process because we love each other. And because the magic of a relationship is not actually in being connected all the time. The magic of a relationship happens when we are willing and brave enough to do real repairs with each other.
This may sound kind of silly, but I think millions of times around the world, the same conversation happens in early evening. You know, what do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you want to eat? I chose last time. Well, I don't want to go here. What about, you know, so I know maybe it's a silly example, but is that a good example of how, you know, with a change in language that a couple could work better together?
Yeah, so this is where, look, at the very least, it would be great if people were open to understanding the science of what love is. And again, with science, in short, the best theory we have of what love is love is the need to be attached, emotionally bonded. And we all need to be emotionally bonded from the cradle to the grave. It's not optional. When you were born, if you didn't have a good enough other be there on the other side of your birth, a dingo would come and eat you. So if it looks like your primary person isn't there, your body is built to feel really bad inside and to protest it so that you stay alive, right? It's like, again, it's not like, you know, touched by an angel love. It's from the ground up, the essence of what it is to be a human being. So here you are a grown-up and you may not be aware that actually when my primary person isn't there for me, I actually get threatened inside. You actually think, look, I just don't know what I want to eat. What the hell? I chose yesterday, right? But actually, what's happening is both of your answers, like, hey, what do you want to eat? Oh, Jesus, I might be in trouble if I don't answer right. And then I say, I chose yesterday. And the other person is, oh, my God, how come you won't show up? I asked you a simple question. You won't answer me. Both of you are actually experiencing, even if you're not aware of it, an emotional bonding related threat in that conversation, because you both look like you're not there for each other in the way you long for. And because you're each other's primary person, it actually hits threatening places inside.
What does a couple do when there's, I guess, an outside threat and they feel differently about it and they want to respond differently about it, but it would be better if they unite? Is there a process through which they can go to acknowledge it and then come to a common understanding?
Absolutely. So so here's like, of course, it's messy. Nothing is perfectly smooth, but let's, I mean, there's a couple of different types of outside threats, but, you know, give me an example of what you mean by an outside threat so I answer accurately.
I don't know. Let's say a neighbor is being a real jerk and either making noise or throwing something into the yard, or who knows, someone.
What's your neighbor's name?
I don't. It's not a real example, but I'll just say Bob.
I'm kidding you.
Bob's.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say there's a neighbor throwing stuff in the yard, and one person is let's throw stuff back, or like, you know, slashes tires, and the other person is, hey, I think we should go talk to him, right? So, look, the most important first thing to do is to be able to see, like, what is the emotional bonding issue that's happening between you and me, dear spouse of mine? How is it that we're not feeling we're there for each other? And is there a way we can prioritize each other's feelings that are coming up that was triggered by the neighbor throwing stuff into our yard? And if the two of us can actually show that we accept each other's feelings, our feelings are valid, and forgive my technical language, we give a shit about each other's feelings, now, because we're back emotionally bonded, you're going to be at the most resource place inside of yourselves, both of you, and between each other to come up with the right plan of action to deal with the neighbor. Now, as an outside party, I vote for slashing the tires, but it's not up to me. It's going to be up to that couple.
How do you, I don't know if you see this, but in certain relationships, do you see that, I don't know, one or both people, everything's about them somehow, even when the issue is not about them, they make it about them? I was going to ask you, like, what are some of the, either the most common or the most intractable problems that you see? So that just came to mind.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So look, they always make it about them. So because it's not, the issue isn't what they're talking about, right? Deep down inside, on some level, they don't really feel they're getting a particular flavor of love, whether that's, I really don't feel seen, I really don't feel heard, I really don't feel considered, I really don't feel valued. And so, yeah, no matter whatever topic it is, you're like, can you believe the Eagles lost? They were robbed, right? Look, then they're going to say, like, you know what? I don't like the Super Bowl. I think it's like, well, why are they saying that in that moment? Because on some level, deep down inside, they're still fighting for a particular flavor of love from you. And until that flavor of love is acknowledged, accepted, it's validated, and they actually receive that love, yeah, they're going to make it, quote unquote, about themselves.
Interesting. What about if you have one person in a couple that never can admit they're wrong?
Yeah, but again, so look, if someone can't admit they're wrong, right? Like, so what would it be like for them to admit they're wrong? Usually when someone can't admit they're wrong, it's because they feel shame inside. So there's 4 things people do when they feel ashamed. They attack other, attack self, deny there's a problem, or collapse. So if someone cannot admit they're wrong, it's just because the pain of the not enoughness or too muchness is so unbearable for them that this is the crazy thing that we do as human beings. I would rather executing this strategy, I'll never admit I'm wrong, even though it'll hurt the other person. The other person will now look at me like I'm even more wrong. But it's still almost impossible for me to feel deeply my own shame. So I'll continue to engage in a strategy that inevitably is going to make things worse for me. But here's the punchline. How awful for that person. I have nothing but love and care for that person. And through loving them and understanding them, they'll one day feel safe enough to actually give up that strategy and feel the shame and have an opportunity to be loved and cared for in that place where they feel bad about themselves.
And got one more to ask you. I've heard this throughout the years from some people, like, I don't know, this waitress I knew, she lived with her mom still. She was probably in her 40s, and, you know, her brother and sister didn't live with the mom, and it just seemed like she gave her life to the mom, you know. So I said, why don't you do this to that, or maybe do this and that? She just said, I know, in like a sad, resigned voice. And I've heard that from different people throughout time, and I don't know why they say that or what that means. Like, what are they saying when they say something?
Well, so what does it mean when they say that?
Yeah, I ask because I've heard it a lot from different
Yeah. So
and it's always when there's something that maybe to someone else is out, it's something that's hurting them, but they just can't or won't or whatever overcome it. And they give this resigned, like.
Yeah, but this is where I think, no offense, you might be misinterpreting what the invitation is for you when they tell you this information. What people usually want is to truly be listened to feel heard, and to see you accept their experience and you validate them and you feel empathy for them, because that actually gives an opportunity for real connection. When you're offering a solution, here's the weird thing, even though you're coming from the best, good-hearted place in the world to offer a solution, you've actually missed the most important thing that needed to happen, that they felt you were really with them in a living moment of time, and you got that. But when you jump to offering a solution, it's kind of sad and depressing because you missed them.
Okay. I guess this comes from my guyness. You know, I have to
get it
when I hear problems instead of, exactly, you just list things.
Exactly. Well, that would be your work, as opposed to, right? Your work, ideally, if you wanted to go to gym and how to have a better relationship, would be, how can I be present more with people, accept, validate their experience, and have empathy for them, and to a point where they feel it, and delay offering solutions. If you empathize with someone and then they offer you, like they ask you, like I always say, like as a therapist, look, I'm like a vampire. I have to be invited in, right? Can't be walking over people's threshold unless I've been invited in. You know, all guys out there, let's say your solution finding, you know, chronic value adding part of you, with your hands, sit on your hands, listen to some people, empathize with them. Connection is what people need. They don't actually need solutions.
No, that's an alien concept, but I'll try to take it to heart here.
No, if you knew it, then sure, then it wouldn't be important for you.
Yeah, thanks for giving that example. I'm not trying to make this just about me, but I'm just giving things that I've seen.
I noticed that, but you're not trying to make it about you. But that's the thing. This is just an important point, right? It's really easy to see other people. It's not that easy to study and be curious about ourselves and what we co-create with other human beings. That's the real work.
Okay. So in your couples therapy, I asked this a little while ago, but what are some of the most difficult problems that you see couples face that are the hardest for them to break through and resolve?
Well, like an affair, right? Betrayal is definitely, well, was probably the hardest, right? Yeah, an affair is probably the hardest, but then also, weirdly, is two people that are both committed to withdrawing from conflict. They're both conflict avoiders. They're both, everything's okay, we don't have to deal with something. Though that kind of couple is actually very hard because I actually have to light a fire under their little seats and create some enough discomfort that I'll actually get to see what their real wounding is. Because what I need in order to help people is their suffering. And most people are pretty committed to not suffering, right? So, but I need to see their suffering if I'm going to be able to turn that base metal of suffering into gold, right? Through the alchemical process that is, experiential psychotherapy.
Oh, what about if you have a couple ways been domestic violence? One hit.
Wow.
That happened.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, yeah, I should say that couples counseling is not indicated. It's not appropriate to do couples counseling if there's domestic violence or a risk of domestic violence. So just, sorry, yeah. So there's kind of an assumption here. A prerequisite is that there's not domestic violence or a risk of domestic violence. I'm not going to sit with a couple where starting to do that kind of exploration of self, hearing the other person and exploring and understanding and feeling what we co-create with each other that makes it so difficult. Like, if that process is at risk of someone's going to be, or both people could be physically hurt, right? Then they need to do individual counseling first so that they can sort that out individually so that it's safe for us to come together, in a couple to do relationship work.
How do you, I don't know if you've had instances, but is it a problem sometimes where a couple will come and both will say a bunch of things and then they leave and then one of them like attacks the other verbally? I can't believe you said that, that kind of thing. When they should leave it with, otherwise they're going to be afraid to tell you something. So have you seen that and what happens then?
No, of course. No, of course it does. I mean, it happens all the time. Look, I always think it's funny, like, fig said can be used. It's amazing. This is like, look, words, the exact same words, well, fig said can be used and as it helps the couple. It's an invitation to de-escalate. We both make sense, right? But also, well, fig said can be used to shame, reject, or abandon their partner. And look, it's a normal part of the process that we're trying to invite vulnerability and sharing and study of the system. It makes sense that sometimes in a session, one person says something that it was really hard for the other partner to hear and then also be seen hearing by a third party, and that they'll be mad at them, right? But, so again, we'll study it, organize it, try and understand what happened inside of both people, put it in the system, and help them de-escalate, right? Like, when people fight and they get upset with each other, it's brilliant, right? Because that's the real power of couples counseling, is that we don't just work on things academically. We actually work on it in real time. It's kind of like, imagine like if you were training to be a firefighter, right? Wouldn't it be great if you actually trained at putting out real fires versus studying how to put out fires? So that's what I love about couples counseling is, like, we actually work on it in real time while the fire just got ignited and it's getting bigger, if that makes sense.
So you have the benefit of hearing hundreds of things and resolving lots of conflicts.
Yeah.
The clients themselves, I mean, would there be a way where, let's say you just had the audio with names, bleeped out if there's any, but again, would it be helpful for couples going through counseling if they could hear a couple other couples? Again, they wouldn't know who they are. So they could hear like some of the issues come up in part of a therapy session if permission was given.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and by the way, my wife and I have our own podcast. It's called, it's not a plug for the podcast, but if it would be helpful for people.
It's okay, yeah.
It's called the Come Here to Me podcast, and we actually share. We're both couples therapists. We both train other therapists. We're trainers of couples therapists, right? We've both done, I don't know what I've done, like 20,000 hours. She's done like 15,000 hours as a couples therapist, we're whatever level of mastery of this stuff. And we actually share our own personal couples therapy sessions where we're the client. We talk about the session beforehand, we share the therapy session, and we talk about it afterwards. And we share that with the world, with the general public. Again, to try and help them understand how normal they are, what relationships are really like, and how you can, transform hard moments into even deeper connection that would be possible if that hard moment never happened at all.
That's really cool.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I want to provide resources for listeners. So if you can, just restate the name of your podcast and where is it? And yeah, I definitely encourage people interested to check it out. With that.
So yeah, it's just a Come Here to Me podcast. Come Here to Me podcast.
Okay.
It's on all the, whatever. It's on all the streaming, platforms, right?
Yeah, it's wherever a podcast can be heard.
Exactly. There you go. You know the lingo. Yeah. Exactly.
So what's, from your point of view, like, why do couples, I don't know if it's like you give up after a long time and they do couples therapy, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but why do they engage in couples therapy? What triggers them to say, okay, let's try it?
Well, so the main thing that triggers them to try it is that everything they've been doing hasn't working, right? Whether that's minimizing the problems, confronting the problems, like defending themselves, criticizing, whatever stuff they do. It hasn't been working, and it hurts so much that they're finally willing to actually try to get some expert advice. Now, the problem is, not all couples counseling is the same. Like what I just described to you isn't what most couples therapists do, right? They're not actually working on trying to find, look, you both make sense. I get how you're both hurting, and I can understand your reactivity. And then help them feel safe, and then help them reach out and get their needs met vulnerably from each other. Like most couples therapists are still just like being, what would you call it, like judge and jury, and they're like helping people correct their behaviors, offering solutions. And like I said, that shit doesn't work. So here's the really sad thing is most, they go couples counseling, they reach out for it, but it doesn't mean they're actually getting effective help. Now, and of course, I feel like I've earned the right to say that after, this is like, I have to be good at something. I just happen to find this thing, right? Like locally, I wasn't a great potato farmer. I wasn't a great stockbroker. I was too scared playing rugby, even though I loved it, but I really didn't like when someone ran directly at me as hard as they could and I was supposed to tackle them. So, but luckily the old couples counseling thing happened to be like, who knew? So look, here's what I would recommend. Obviously, reach out to us at Empathy, like you said, empathy with an I at the end.com, right? We couldn't afford empathy with a Y in the end.com. So we had to just jimmy rig like empathy.com, right?
Okay. I think I actually pronounced it wrong. I think I put him in empathy.
I know, but look, you were consistent, right? You pronounced the company name the same way you pronounced my name. So I really like the consistency.
This made me go laugh. I did an escape room with my kids a couple of years ago. We were down to the wire, and there was like this puzzle. We had to arrange the letters, and I was frustrated, and I didn't know what it was saying. I thought it said incanditi or something. I just said it out loud, and it was actually I can decide. My kids made fun of me for like years after that.
Right.
So this is like another example.
Nice. I know. By the way, I had something like that with my kids the other day too. How did I read Chihuahua? And I was like, I can't really remember how I pronounced it, but my daughter loved that my reading skills are so limited, that I couldn't pronounce Chihuahua. But yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Well, very cool. Just a couple of questions more, and then we'll wrap. So having done so many thousands of hours of therapy, what are some of the common trends that you see, and are they changing over time? You must be doing this for X number of years. So what do you see that you didn't see before only because you have so much experience?
Oh, people are reaching out earlier. The good news is, like, younger generations, their threshold for what is acceptable levels of disconnection or discord in relationship is lower and lower, and they will reach out for help. So that's really encouraging. They're less likely to go, sure, isn't this life? Don't you just put up with what you get? You knew what you're getting into when you married me. They're like, I have to do that in an Irish accent for some reason, right? Like a real, but like they're less willing to tolerate that shit. And so they're going to reach out for therapy sooner. The other thing, just to be clear, is what I see is that people are really good. People are really doing their best, right? They don't fully understand themselves and they don't feel fully understood. And everything changes once they feel really accepted, validated, and empathized with by their partner. Everything can get better if we can make them have that experience with each other. And then the last thing is like, it's less likely. But again, let's say, if I'm 51, right, my generation, it's definitely more likely that the person that is emotionally withdrawn in relationship is a guy in a heterosexual relationship, and the woman, let's say in a heterosexual relationship, is the one that is feeling not prioritized and is always looking for more connection. That is shifting with the younger generations, that it's more of a toss-up, right? Who's going to be the one that is like, hey, give me some time to be on Instagram? Like, that's as likely to be the woman as the man. And the man is as likely as the woman to be like, how come you're not spending more time with?
Very interesting. All right. Oh, I was going to say, are there any other, big dividing lines? Like, you see couples where one's an introvert, one's an extrovert. Does that cause friction? Or, what are some elements in couples where they've already chosen each other, but you could see like there's something fundamental that's going to make it hard for them to have a good relationship?
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? All of that stuff, I'm an introvert, you're an extrovert, you love Trump, I love Biden, I'm an anti-vaxxer, you're like vaccinating yourself daily, just getting extras for fun, right? Look, here's the weird thing. It's going to sound weird to people. That stuff isn't actually as important as you think. If we sort out the attachment, the from the ground up biology, that you're so important to me, I need to know that I'm a priority to you, and then the other way around, you're so important to me that I need to know I'm enough for you, you're not disappointed in me. If we sort that part out, it's amazing how much all the other shit doesn't matter that much. Like as long as if I'm a priority to my wife and I'm enough for her, and she's a priority to me and she's enough for me, I don't mind. She can head off to a trunk rally today. Hey, good luck, sweetie. I'll help you make your sign. I don't care, right? As if we have the, as long as she doesn't try and vaccinate me, give me extra shots. I'm being facetious now, right? But it's sort of, here's the crazy thing. Most stuff does it. What really matters is the love stuff. And we then make the other stuff a big deal if we're not really feeling that emotional bond with each other. So sort the emotional bonding part out first, and then return to your, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert, or I love wearing red hats with, Make America Great Again, and you love your blue hats. I will be very surprised if that stuff is actually that important if we sort out the emotional bonding piece.
Is that kind of stuff dividing people today more? And if so, why? Or is it just, yes, and it's really...
Well, again, it is dividing people more, for sure. And again, it's if we can get the issue is just whatever the issue is. Let's say it was we both believe in we have different political beliefs. I'll just use that as an example. But I have to make sure on time. Yeah, I'm good. So we both believe in different political, we're on different ends of the political spectrum. That's actually not the biggest issue. The biggest issue would be when we talk about politics, one of us, let's say, for example, feels unheard, and the other feels, right, that I'm unacceptable. If we can get the couple to actually empathize and care about the feelings of being unheard and the feelings of being unacceptable, right, that's the thing. If we can accomplish that, and then we return to a political conversation, I guarantee you that political conversation is going to be very, very different. It could actually be very productive. So look, I mean, why is there more division in our society? Is, of course, we're not having those conversations. We're not accepting and validating each other. It's easier to live in our individual, our separate, echo chambers and bubbles. And it's just so much more acceptable. Again, I don't have to accept and validate and empathize with people, right? I can go to my little Facebook group, or I can go to my family or my church or my yoga community, whatever world you live in, and I'm just going to be in an echo chamber, get confirmation bias. So look, the world is set up today that we're losing the art of accepting other people's experience as valid and empathizing with them. And making it safe for each other to get along with each other. People are good. That's the thing. I really want to was my big takeaway from doing all this work and meeting people at their worst, Jordan would say, people are really good.
Well, thanks. It's been a great call. I had a lot of fun. Learned a lot of stuff. It was really cool to meet you. And let's recap now. Where can listeners go for your podcast, for your website, counseling, etc.? What are all these resources?
Yeah, so the podcast is Come Here to Me podcast, right? And there's a website, comeheretomepodcast.com. And then our main website where we have an app that we built for couples, it's all free, is empathywith9end.com. And then we offer counseling and coaching for individuals and couples all over America and the world, and English-speaking world and Spanish. But that's empathywith9end.com. And I think and then all of the social media stuff is Empathy Now. So it's Empathy with an I and NOW and all the platforms.
Okay, and then you do in person and online, or
we do all online. All of the actual counseling or coaching.
Oh, well, very good. Well, again, Figs, it's been a great call. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes. You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.